Okay, dear friends. Well, I want to extend a very warm welcome on behalf of the entire Bennett family, and in particular Kathleen and daughters Jasmine, Cassidy, Melanie, and Carmel, as well as the extended families of the Owens and the Freys, and really to each and every one of you that are here today for coming to this place on this beautiful afternoon to celebrate and honor the life of Ralph Isaac Bennett, which most of us just knew as Ike. I also want to acknowledge these traditional homelands of the Lekwungen people, who are known today as the Songwees and Esquimalt First Nations, whose territories we are blessed to be on, lands that are now the eternal resting place of our dear Ike Bennett, and will now and forever he will be a part of this land and the life of this place. You know, dear friends, sometimes we are called together to meet, and we come. And sometimes we are brought together by circumstance. And sometimes we are drawn together, magnetized and attracted by something great that brings us together. I would suggest that tonight we are drawn together, magnetized by our common admiration, love, and respect for Ike. So my name is Puyan Mahboubi, and I'm honored to MC our time together this afternoon. Ike and I first met around the turn of the century, this century as in the year 2000. When he and his family moved to Prince Rupert, British Columbia, this was a small northern community up north. For those of you who have not been there, it's a beautiful, small, quaint town. This was a return trip for Ike. He had been there during his youth when his parents pioneered there as Baha'is to help share and apply the teachings of Baha'u'llah to help increase the levels of unity and vibrancy of that community. And now, years later, Ike had returned, and he and I became friends and collaborators in this work that essentially bound our paths for 2 decades to follow. One of the joint projects that Ike and I worked on was spiritual education classes for children. We had many children in our classes. Many of them were from conditions of poverty and very difficult home circumstances. Ike was really an anchor and a friend, a loving friend to all of those children. He showed up, rain or shine, day in, day out. Many of the children were indigenous and would periodically go back to their home communities, and we would lose touch with them. One of the children who spent some years in our class, he left at about age 8 or 9. More than 10 years went by, and we had no contact with him whatsoever. The boy became a young man and reached a point in his life that he was going through some very difficult circumstances. His situation had become so difficult that he was seriously considering possibilities of self-harm. And in that period of anguish, amongst all of the possible channels that he might have turned to, after having lost touch with us for 10 plus years, he came back looking for solace from Ike, his children's classes teacher. I asked him some time later, why did you come back after so long and seek Ike? And he said he couldn't really explain it exactly, but he was drawn to Ike. So, dear friends, I think we are here today because we are collectively drawn together by the sincere and kind life and legacy of Ike Bennett. And I think if our hearts are open today, we will know that Ike's spiritual presence is with us today in this place. Abdu'l-Baha, who is one of the central figures of the Baha'i faith, he wrote these words: "There's no doubt that the forces of the higher world interplay with the forces of this plane. When the heart is open to inspiration, there is spiritual communication. Those who have passed on through death have a sphere of their own. It is not removed from ours. Their work, the work of the kingdom, is ours, but it is sanctified from what we call time and place. But there is no real separation. In prayer, there is a mingling of stations, a mingling of condition. Pray for them as they pray for you." I hope today, this afternoon, through a meeting of the hearts, through the beautiful program that's ahead of us, that we will feel Ike's presence here, his kind and accepting and generous presence here amongst us. So without further delay, I would like to call on the readers and presenters to come forward one at a time to begin our program.
O my God, O thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, dispeller of afflictions, verily I beseech thee to forgive the sins of such as have abandoned the physical garment and have ascended to the spiritual world. May our love guide you home. May our prayers carry you home. O my Lord, purify them from trespasses. Dispel their sorrows and change their darkness into light. Cause them to enter the garden of happiness and delight. Cleanse them with the most pure water and grant them to behold thy splendor on the loftiest mount. May our love guide you home. May our prayers carry you home. May God open the doors. May He welcome you home.
Thank you, Roya, for that beautiful prayer. And Roya is Ike's niece. And I feel a bit exposed here because I don't have a podium. So you're going to see my hands and my knees shaking. The podium hides that. So next time I'll make sure we have a podium. Thank you. So my name is Kathleen, and I'm sure everyone knows my connection with Ike. I'm his wife of 38 years. And so I'll be doing the eulogy for Ike. I'd like to begin by acknowledging and honoring that we are gathering here today on the unceded territory of the Lekwungen and Wasanic peoples. I also would like to thank everyone for coming to celebrate Ike Bennett's life. Ike was the most sincere, kind, and gentle person I have ever known. And I know many of you would agree. Ike was a very loving father, and grandfather, a devoted husband, a steadfast Baha'i, a kind and gentle friend. Ike was born on November 7, 1952, in Fort Huachuca in Arizona, and came to Canada as a baby with his parents. He was the first child of Fletcher Bennett and Eleanor Bennett. They passed away in 2013 and 2014, respectively. His younger sister, Gail Bennett Owens, passed away last October 2021, leaving behind her husband, Colin Owens, and their 2 children, Jesse and Amy, and their spouses, and 3 grandchildren, Miles, Eleanor, and Rupert. And Ike's brother, Fletcher Bennett Jr., and his wife, Azar, son Bayan, son Nabil, and his daughter, Roya, and her family. Ike dearly loved his siblings and all the members of his extended family. Ike had deep sense of respect for his parents. Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, revealed a prayer for parents, and Ike said that prayer daily for his parents. Now he's in the spiritual world with his parents and his sister, and all those grandparents and other deceased relatives. When Ike gave his final breath on March 13, 2022, his brother Fletcher was with him, reciting prayers and sharing Baha'i stories with him. We believe this is how Ike chose to pass away, in the company of his brother and surrounded by prayer. Ike loved to pray. He prayed daily, so praying was very familiar to him. From the age of 3, Ike and his family lived in Pincher Creek on a cattle farm until 1960. Ike was 7 when his family moved to Salt Spring, BC. They lived there until Ike was 17. It was in Salt Spring that Ike's parents were introduced to the Baha'i faith. Growing up with Baha'i values, Ike and his siblings were deeply influenced by the teachings of the Baha'i faith. Then in 1971, the family moved to Prince Rupert, where they lived for 10 years on Borden Street, for those who know Prince Rupert. Ike graduated from high school in Prince Rupert in 1971. After graduating from high school, Ike did several small jobs, traveled a bit, then moved to the Kootenays and studied fine arts at the local college in Nelson, BC for 2 years. In 1981, Ike decided to travel to the Caribbean island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to assist other Baha'is with administrative duties and to support the Baha'i community there. In 1983, Ike and I met in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we got married there in 1985. However, after 1 month of meeting each other, we knew that we would marry each other. And Ike sent a letter to his parents asking for consent to marry me. It is a universal Baha'i law to seek consent from parents before marriage. I was so certain about Ike because he met all of the characteristics and criteria that I was looking for in a spouse. I had a poem that I would recite for years in private and in church that I used to go to that speaks to the kind of man I wanted. I also said that poem at our wedding. It goes like this. Dear God, I prayed, all unafraid, as girls are wont to be. I do not need a handsome man, but let him be like thee. I do not need one big and strong, nor need he be very tall, but let his face have character, a ruggedness of soul. And when he comes, as he has come, with quiet eyes aglow. Lord, I'll understand that he's the man I prayed for long ago. That's the Ike Bennett that I marry. I said that poem at our wedding, and my mother-in-law kept it in a family album for 38 years, and was discovered when my daughters visited me in May in Prince Rupert. They found that poem in a family album. I thought this is more than a coincidence. I feel everything seems to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. In 1985, Ike and I immigrated to Canada, and he completed 2 bachelor's degrees, one in fine arts and one in social work at the University of Victoria. An example of Ike's deep caring for me, which was in part influenced by the Baha'i writings, to practice the equality between men and women, Ike, after completing his degrees, he became an at-home parent for 5 years to our 4 daughters. So I could pursue my own degree in social work. Then in 1998, the whole family moved to Prince Rupert for me to begin my first employment with the Ministry for Children and Families. Ike worked at the Thompson Community Services as a support worker until he retired last September 2021. Ike was very passionate about his work, loved the individuals he worked with, and enjoyed working with his colleagues. A couple of days before Ike passed, during moments of lucidity and confusion, he kept asking for bread, milk, and water to give to the individual in the wheelchair that he worked with for 13 years. In Ike's mind, his work was akin to worshiping God. Ike loved his 4 daughters with an indescribable tenderness. His daughters, Jasmine, Cassie, Melanie, and Carmel, all have many special memories of their dad, and his absence in their lives is unfathomable. When Ike was at the Vancouver General Hospital, the hospital social worker, during an assessment, asked him, "What was the best thing that ever happened to you?" And he replied, "Being a father." And he proceeded to describe each daughter with such tenderness, fondness, and pride, including walking his eldest daughter down the aisles 14 years ago when she got married. I wish I had recorded what he said to share with his daughters. His daughters, with the support of helpful employers, were able to be with their dad in the hospital until he passed. Each daughter had a chance to spend one-on-one with their dad at his bedside as he was dying. And in tears, they all asked for his blessings. And he gave his blessings to each of them, including their partners and spouses. I think that was very special. Ike did not want to leave his daughters and family behind. A couple days before he passed, when he could barely speak, and one of his daughters was holding his hand, he said, "I don't want to go." And she said, "We don't want you to go, Dad." Each daughter wrote love notes on a small card, which I put in a beautiful pouch with his special pens in his coffin. If he could reply to those notes to each of you, my daughters, I know it would be words of love, pride, and encouragement. To show the depth of Ike's love for his daughters, the day he died, the twins were a little bit tentative about their birthday the next day. And they said, oh, if Dad dies on our birthday, every birthday we'll remember the death. So it will be like a mixed feeling of celebration of our birthdays and knowing Dad died. And I know he was hearing us. And I said, Ike, I know you're hearing us, but could you die either before the birthday or the next day? And he listened, and he complied, and he passed that day, the day before their birthday. That's the devotion of a father's love. The story about Ike's pens. Ike had this idiosyncrasies about his pens. So every day he had a stack of pens that he'll walk around with all day. And he'll put them down before he goes to bed. Even when he went to the hospital, where is his pen? So that's the reason why we put a couple of pens in the pouch in his coffin. And so I thought that was just Ike. So on January 7th, 2022, Ike and I celebrated our 38th wedding anniversary. I partly attributed my youthful looks to being happily married to Ike. That's a bit vain, but... that was just to make you laugh. Ike was a kind, tender, forgiving, loving, affectionate husband and possessed a unique sense of humor. All of us who knew Ike would have memories of some of those funny Ike moments. He particularly excelled at puns. He loved to make puns. It is very sad and distressing to live with the absence of such a wonderful human being as Ike. He was once here among us. Now he's not with us, and he's not among us, at least not physically. The Baha'i community grieves the loss of a devoted and steadfast Baha'i. Faith was Ike's purpose for being, and he applied the Baha'i teachings to transform his own life and was always enthusiastic to share his faith and beliefs to whoever would listen to him. I believe that Ike is busy in the spiritual world doing what he does best, loving people, praying for others, and contributing to the spiritual advancement of humanity. The Baha'i faith teaches that the love that one has for someone in this life continues in the next life, beyond the death of the physical body. I believe that Ike is lovingly supporting all the people he loved here, his wife and children and grandchildren from the spiritual world. Finally, I would like to end with this Baha'i quote that best befits Ike's new reality. Quote, "The purpose underlying the revelation from the prophets of God hath been to educate all men, that they may at the hour of death ascend in the utmost purity and sanctity and with absolute detachment to the throne of the Most High. The light which these souls radiate is responsible for the progress of the world and the advancement of its peoples." Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I'm Marin.
And I'm Avery.
We're just going to read some good memories of Grandpa. A memory with Grandpa that I will never forget is when he came to visit us for Christmas. I remember coming downstairs to my mom scolding him for eating all of our vitamin gummies. He was sick for the next few days.
Another one is when my sister, Grandma, and I were busy cleaning the house because my parents were on vacation. Meanwhile, Grandpa lounged on the deck listening to opera music. When we confronted him about him not helping us, his excuse was, "No, I did the dishes yesterday."
Our favorite and grossest memory is when we were going on a road trip with Grandma and Grandpa, and they would not stop farting in the car.
And burping.
Yeah. My sister and I had to roll down our windows and cover our noses with the stuffed animals that Grandpa bought us at the mall. I'm not too sure what they ate that day, but man, did those farts stink. Okay.
Wow, that's a tough act to follow. In the next world, man will find himself freed from many of the disabilities under which he now suffers. Those who have passed on through death have a sphere of their own. It is not removed from ours. Their work, the work of the kingdom, is ours. But it is sanctified from what we call time and place. Time with us is measured by the sun. When there is no more sunrise and no more sunset, that kind of time does not exist for men. Those who have ascended have different attributes from those who are still on earth. Yet, there is no real separation.
I just wrote a little something about my dad. When I think of my dad, I think of his love and dedication to the Baha'i faith. He was a quiet man, but when he would talk about the Baha'i faith, he could talk to you for hours. He would make sure that we didn't miss Baha'i feasts, celebrations, children's classes, and our nightly prayers/devotions. Something us kids didn't always love or appreciate at the time. But looking back now, I know that he just wanted us to grow up with good values and a moral compass. When I think of my dad, I think of his curiosity and his love of nature. He loved to take us on family walks on the weekends in Rupert, down by the waterfront, or on the Bootsy Rapids Trail. My dad would be trailing behind us because he loved to take his time walking and would be taking everything around him. He loved to stop every couple of minutes to take pictures of the plants or trees, and a 15-minute walk could easily turn into an hour walk. When I think of my dad, I think of his creative mind and beautiful artwork. My dad had a great imagination and a keen eye for beauty. I loved his colorful paintings, which were usually abstract. My dad also loved to sketch. Any scrap of paper he would use to draw, even napkins at restaurants would turn into little sketches and cartoons. When I think of my dad, I think of his quiet, gentle, and loving presence. He loved spending time with his family and didn't always have a lot to say, but would always have a pun or dad joke to add to the conversation. When I think of my dad, I think of his love of jazz and classical music. In the mornings, he would always have a radio station either playing some jazz or classical, sometimes a little too early in the morning. One of my dad's dreams was to be a stage performer or singer. And I would love to hear his Elvis or Frank Sinatra karaoke renditions. I'll remember my dad by all of those things, but what I'll miss the most is his smile, his hugs, and his love.
I'm
Cassie, the other twin. I'll start off by just saying a writing in the Baha'i faith, and then after that, my dad's cousin, Carol, sent us something to read on her behalf because she couldn't be here today. O my servants, sorrow not, if in these days and on this earthly plane things contrary to your wishes have been ordained and manifested by God, for days of blissful joy, of heavenly delight are assuredly in store for you. Worlds holy and spiritually glorious will be unveiled to your eyes. You are destined by him, in this world and hereafter, to partake of their benefits, to share of their joys, and to obtain a portion of their sustaining grace. To earn, so to each and every one of them, you will no doubt attain. Some words about Ike, my cousin. I am so very sorry that Ike left us all too soon. I knew Ike best as my younger cousin, always a bit goofy, a little shy, with that sweet little smile of his. I have lots of happy memories of this time. When I visited my Aunt Eleanor at the Lockey Bell Ranch in the 1950s, Ike and Fletcher Jr. shared a bedroom. It was subject to inspection every morning by their mother. I wonder if she knew Ike would give 5 cents of his allowance to Fletcher to make his bed for him every morning. The ranch was a wonderful place for the two boys to grow up. Horses to ride, Splinter the deer, whom Eleanor nursed back to health and a normal deer's life. Lots of exploring in the foothills of the Rockies. One time, we kids all piled into a car with Nana Fry, Eleanor, and my mom for a picnic by the creek. Ike saw a bull mounting a cow on the road. He got very upset. "Mommy, Mommy," he said, "what is he doing?" Nana very calmly replied, "It's all right, dear. He's just pushing her off the road." Somehow I knew that was not quite what was happening. Too soon for me, the Bennetts moved away to Salt Spring Island, where Gail was born. My mom loved Ike's drawings that were frequently sent to her in the mail. They are also so life, so imaginative, my mom would say. Ike went to art school in Nelson and taught there after he graduated. Mom was proud of the large oil paintings he sent to us and put it above the sofa in our living room until she moved into a senior's home decades later. Mom used to say, Ike is a dreamer. Yes, he was special, living in a world of his making. An artist, an idealist, a lucky guy to have found a perfect partner in Kathleen. Ike and Kathleen made the best children you could ever meet. As I said to Kathleen and Ike shortly before he passed away, you sure know how to grow children. The strong faith in God that their parents passed down to them gave the 4 graces a spiritual beauty that shines from within. Both parents can be credited with guiding their lives to be filled with love for God, for others, and for nature. Kathleen listens carefully to others and helps people find practical solutions to their emotional distress. Ike brought the best in his daughters by just being his sweet self. I'm sure that he did that for everyone around him. I wish he could have stayed with us a little bit longer. With love, Cousin Carol.
I'm Jasmine. I'm Ike's oldest daughter. I'm just going to read a poem called The Next Place by Warren Hansen. The next place that I go will be as peaceful and familiar as a sleepy summer Sunday, and a sweet, untroubled mind. And yet, it won't be anything like any place I've ever been, or seen, or even dreamed of. In the place I leave behind, I won't know where I'm going, and I won't know where I've been. As I tumble through the always and look back toward the when, I'll glide beyond the rainbows. I'll drift above the sky. I'll fly into the wonder without ever wondering why. I won't remember getting there. Somehow I'll just arrive, and I'll know that I belong there, and will feel much more alive than I've ever felt before. I will be absolutely free of the things that I held on to, that were holding on to me. The next place that I go will be so quiet and so still, that the whispered song of sweet belongings will rise up to fill the listening sky with joyful silence, and with the unheard harmonies of music made by no one playing. Like a hush upon a breeze, there will be no room for darkness in that place of living light, where an ever-dawning morning pushes back the dying night. The very air will fill with brilliance as the brightly shining sun, and the moon and 500,000 stars are married into one. The next place that I go won't really be a place at all. There won't be any seasons, winter, summer, spring, or fall, nor a Monday, nor a Friday, nor December, nor July, and the seconds will be standing still while hours hurry by. I will not be a boy or a girl, a man or a woman. I'll simply be just me, no worse or better than. My skin will not be dark or light. I won't be fat or tall. The body I once lived in won't be part of me at all. I will finally be perfect and will be without a flaw. I will never make one more mistake or break the smallest law. And the me that was impatient or was angry or unkind will simply be a memory, the me I left behind. I will travel empty-handed. There is not a single thing I have collected in my life that I would ever want to bring except the love of those who loved me and the warmth of those who cared, the happiness and memories and magic that we shared. Though I will know the joy of solitude, I'll never be alone. I'll be embraced by all the family and friends I've ever known. Although I might not see their faces, all our hearts will beat as one, and the circle of our spirits will shine brighter than the sun. I will cherish all the friendships I was fortunate to find, all love and all the laughter in the place I leave behind. All these good things will go with me. They will make my spirit glow, and that light will shine forever in the next place that I go.
I feel like if Ike was here, well, I should say I'm Brady, I'm Jasmine's husband. If Ike's here watching us, I can just picture him with his iPhone out, videotaping everyone. Whether you're aware of it or not, he would be videotaping you. Okay, I have a poem also. We can't hug them or see them with our eyes, but we can still feel them in our hearts. That brings me comfort. I hope it does for you too. When we lose someone, they become an indelible force in our lives, even after they're gone. We remember the way they told a joke, wore their hair, and walked into a room. The littlest things will trigger memories of the sound of their voice, their scent, the times we spent with them. We recall how they dealt with hard situations when we are faced with the same things. We think about them for no reason at all. What would they say right now? We will always wonder, are they watching over us? Do they know how much we miss them? Even though we will never see loved ones who've passed on walk through the front door again, I hope you can find peace with the knowledge that you'll always have a part of them with you. When we love someone, their spirit lives forever in our hearts.
I'm Carmel, Ike's youngest daughter. I wish I could have come up with something to say about my dad, but it's really hard to get through it without crying. And but yeah, I'm just happy everyone's here, and there's been so many kind things said about my dad. He's so wonderful. So I'm going to read a poem by John O'Donohue called "On the Death of the Beloved." It makes me think about my dad and his appreciation for beauty and for art. So. Though we need to weep your loss, you dwell in that safe place in our hearts, where no storm on night or pain can reach you. Your love was like the dawn, brightening over our lives, awakening beneath the dark, a further adventure of color. The sound of your voice found for us a new music that brightened everything. Whatever you enfolded in your gaze, quickened in the joy of its being. You placed smiles like flowers on the altar of the heart. Your mind always sparkled with the wonder at things. Though your days here were brief, your spirit was alive, awake, complete. We look toward each other, no longer from the old distance of our names. Now you dwell inside the rhythm of breath, as close to us as we are to ourselves. Though we cannot see you with outward eyes, we know our souls gaze upon your face, smiling back at us from within everything to which we bring our best refinement. Let us not look for you only in memory, where we would grow lonely without you. You would want us to find you in presence, besides us when beauty brightens, when kindness glows, and music echoes eternal tones. When orchids brighten the earth, darkest winter has turned to spring. May this dark grief flower with hope in every heart that loves you. May you continue to inspire us to enter each day with a generous heart, to serve the call of courage and love until we see your beautiful face again in that land where there is no more separation, where all tears will be wiped from our mind, and where we will never lose you again. Thanks.
I'm Azar, and Ike's brother's wife. As you see that my voice is already gone, so I'm not going to chant for you. هوالله تعالی پروردگارا آمرزگارا نفس نفیسی به ملکوت شهود صعود نمود و از خاکدان فانی به جهان جاودانی شتافت. میهمان عزیز است، عزیز فرما. بنده قدیم است، خلعت بدی عطا کن. ای بی نیاز بیامرز و بنواز و به خلوتگاه راه راه ده و در محفل تجلی همدم و دمساز نما. تویی دهنده و بخشنده و مهربان و تویی آمرزنده و نوازنده و توانا. این
I'm Leanne, and my husband Ed and I and our family had the joy and honor of being with Ike and Kathleen and their family in Prince Rupert. Abdul Baha spoke of the immortality of the spirit. To consider that after the death of the body, the spirit perishes is like imagining that a bird in a cage will be destroyed if the cage is broken, though the bird has nothing to fear from the destruction of the cage. Our body is like the cage, and the spirit is like the bird. We see that without the cage, this bird flies in the world of sleep. Therefore, if the cage becomes broken, the bird will continue and exist. Its feelings will be even more powerful, its perceptions greater, and its happiness increased. In truth, from hell it reaches a paradise of delights, because for the thankful birds, there is no paradise greater than freedom from the cage.
Hello, my name is Jackie, and I'm a friend of Ike and Pam's and their family. I met Ike and Pam 36 years ago in a mall when Jasmine was just knee-high to a grasshopper. Baha'u'llah said, "The world beyond is as different from this world as this world is different from that of the child while still in the womb of its mother." Abdul Baha then said, "Therefore, in this world, he must prepare himself for the life beyond. That which he needs in the world of the kingdom must be obtained here. just as he prepared himself in the world of the matrix, the womb, by acquiring forces necessary in this sphere of existence, so likewise the indispensable forces of the divine existence must be potentially attained in this world.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mike's brother. Welcome, dear friends and family. We are honored that many of you have made a special effort to come here immediately after today's commemoration of the martyrdom of the Bob, who is one of the three central figures of the Baha'i faith. To me, it carries special significance that Ike's memorial also happens on this day. Ike was always interested in history, especially the Baha'i history, and he would have attended nearly 50 commemorations of this event over his lifetime. Let me begin with a little bit of Ike's history, at least the crucial first 30 years of his life, a time when our spiritual identity and DNA of our character begins to form. Ike, a nickname for Isaac, got his name after our mother's well-loved father, Isaac Fry. He was born in the United States during the presidential campaign of Ike Eisenhower, when the ad, "I like Ike," was always on the airways. The jingle kind of stuck, and I must say that when my brother was born in November 1952, everybody liked Ike, including my parents. Ike and my parents moved back to Canada when he was a year old and before I was born. If there are two words to describe Ike's life, I would say that they were quiet gentleness. Not because it was that we never fought. We always did. On occasion, I would fight as if my life depended upon it because of my wounded pride. But Ike always fought fairly. He didn't have to fight very hard because he was always a couple of inches taller than me. Although we may have had different interests and proclivities, we remarkably shared the same Myers-Briggs personality profile, INTP, which comprises roughly 3% of the population. Introverted, intuitive, making decisions based upon thinking and logic, and having a perceiving orientation to the world. Both of us, much like our father and grandfather before us, were quiet and on the surface apparently withdrawn. I sometimes think that these qualities were needed to provide a counterbalance to rambunctious sister Gail, who was more than 7 years our junior. Once Kathleen remarked to my mother that he listens to Gail, but he doesn't listen to me, to which Ike replied, "That's because I'm afraid of Gail." I think it was the same way with me also. Can maybe call into, I don't know. Ike and I were both attracted to truth and beauty. My interests were science, and Ike's interests were drawing and art. I would spend hours reading about science. Ike would spend the same time prolifically perfecting his drawing on small pieces of paper. Ike was slightly more organized than me, having always kept his side of the room tidy, while I struggled to maintain order in a single drawer. We grew up absorbing the inspiration from and values of our parents. Service to the Baha'i faith and the general community was always the most important value in their lives. They moved 7 times during their life, in most cases to pioneer to new areas to serve the faith. On Salt Spring Island, where they discovered and embraced the Baha'i faith, they would have weekly firesides to share the teachings of their new religion with seekers, young and old alike. We grew up with people from all walks of life, and in the late 60s encountered the early hippies who showed strong interest in the faith's progressive ideas. Every morning we would hear Gail downstairs singing Baha'i songs accompanied by my father on piano. Among the songs she would sing would be one of the verses of Baha'u'llah, which begins with, "Blessed is the spot." It would be the same song that we would sing at Ike's funeral. We would often hear the story of Baha'u'llah receiving his revelation while imprisoned in 1852 in chains in the underground dungeon in Tehran known as the Siyachal, Black Pit, also in English, in Tehran. I did not know at the time that the Siyachal was the same location where the ancestors of my future extended family had also been imprisoned. We would be inspired by stories from the Dawnbreakers, a chronicle of the early years of the Baha'i faith, which documents the heroic struggles of the early Babis during the Persian army's siege of the fort of Sheikh Tabarsi, the courage of Mullah Hussein, a disciple of the Bab, who found himself transformed from being feeble and impotent, dejected and timid prior to accepting the new revelation, to being possessed of such courage and power that were all the world, all its peoples and potentates to rise against him, he would, alone and undaunted, withstand their onslaught. As one of the defenders of the fort of Sheikh Tabarsi, he rode out of the fort with the others, shouting, "Ya Sahib al-Zaman, O thou Lord of the age," and scattered the forces of an army more than 10 times larger than that which had just surrounded them. I remember as a child during our family's pilgrimage to the Holy Land, Ike was particularly interested to see the sword of Mullah Hussein that was on display in the Archives building in Mount Carmel, as well as the shrine of the Bab himself. We were visited on occasion or corresponded with many prominent Baha'is, among whom were the Hands of the Cause. I'm Abba, she's calling Abba. Whose main function was to propagate and protect the faith on the international level. Among these were Dr. Furton, Abu Kazam Faizi, John Robarts, Ruia Khanum, and William Sears. Ike and Gail had been part of a memorable encounter with William Sears when we had the honor of hosting him for lunch at our place on Salt Spring Island. As we were both as our family was from Christian background, we continued carrying on the Christian tradition of saying grace at the beginning of every meal. On this occasion, we were all seated with bowls of soup at our places, except for Ike, who had been outside finishing up some artwork he had started on our sun deck. Not willing to wait, my parents had Gail, who was about 6 years younger, start with her prayer, or who was about 6 years old, start with her prayer, "Oh God, guide me, protect me." Ike, at that moment, came in from the deck and absent-mindedly sat down and started to eat Gail's soup. At this point, Gail, reaching the part of "Illumine the lamp of my heart," exclaimed, "Ike, you're eating my soup!" Bill Sears still remembered that delightful incident and reminisced about it to my parents years later. In 1970, we all moved to Prince Rupert as pioneers so that my father could serve the faith, flying his Cessna seaplane to the many First Nations communities in the northern part of BC and Alaska. In Prince Rupert, we continued to have weekly firesides that were well attended and would often listen to the music of Baha'is, seals, and crofts during the visiting afterwards. When Ike graduated from high school, he worked for about a year in Prince Rupert and then went on to study fine arts at the University of Notre Dame in Nelson, BC. In 1977, when another Hand of the Cause, Dr. Furutan, visited Canada, Ike had the honor of driving him to various events with the Russian-speaking Doukhobor communities in the area. True to our parents' example and spiritual legacy, Ike himself went on to pioneer. For him, it was moving to St. Vincent in the Caribbean in the early 1980s. It was there where he met his future wife, Kathleen. I now fast forward to Ike's final days. As you know, when Ike was discovered to have cancer, his family was able to have him moved to the hospice in the Royal Jubilee Hospital. He was not expected to live for another week. I had not visited Ike for a couple of days until Arthur insisted that I do so as I went out that evening. I didn't see it as a priority, but went and did so. As I drove to the hospital, I was thinking, there are some things that we need to carry out as a matter of obedience to our spiritual intuition. As actors in the divine story, not knowing what the outcome would be. Kathleen had not yet had her dinner, and I took her place sitting by Ike's bedside. Jasmine arrived shortly thereafter and said that she would be in the visitor's room, visitor's lounge. I said prayers. Although Ike was unconscious and had been unresponsive that day, I felt inspired to say the Tablet of Ahmad, which, as it carries special potency, had been committed to memory by members of our family. My father often recited it more than once a day throughout his life. Ike would say that prayer hundreds of times over his lifetime. Towards the end of the tablet, Baha'u'llah makes a promise that should anyone read the tablet with absolute sincerity, God will dispel his sadness, solve his difficulties, and remove his afflictions. I have seen the fulfillment of this promise on many occasions, sometimes miraculously. As I said at this time, at one point I began to respond with a sigh for the first time during my visit. As I reached the end of the prayer, although my heart was sincere, my analytical mind was curious how this would play out in the next few days for a person whose illness was terminal. I began to think of what Gail would do if she was here and began singing the verses of prayer she often sang, "Blessed is the spot." As I finished it, I remarked to Ike that this prayer was revealed to a hand of the cause, Ibn Azdak, who had been imprisoned in the same Siyachal that Baha'u'llah had occupied. I should have brought my water here. Let me just have a sip. As I finished it, I mentioned to Ike that this prayer was revealed to a hand of the cause, Ibn Azdak, who had been imprisoned in the same Siyachal that Baha'u'llah had occupied 9 years earlier. I then mentioned to Ike that two brothers who had miraculously survived the siege of Fort Sheikh Tabarsi also were imprisoned at that time with Ibn Azdak. One of these brothers was a direct ancestor of Azar, and the other was a chronicler of the siege of Sheikh Tabarsi that I mentioned earlier. I told Ike, your nephew Bayan is a descendant of one of these brothers. He is saying prayers for you, as his wife Sama, the descendant of another hand of the cause. At this point, Ike sighed deeply, and shortly thereafter, his breath stopped, and his soul winged its flight to the Abha kingdom. Jasmine joined me shortly thereafter. As she lovingly embraced her father one last time, she whispered, "He was waiting for you." When Ike's other daughters arrived, I could see how much they mourned the loss of their father. Ike and I, like many siblings growing up together, may have found our eyes clouded from the many virtues each other possessed. I felt through experiences, through seeing and hearing from the lives of others, that we come to know our family members' true nature. The love of my nieces for their father was like seeing the light of a sunset reflected off the mountains. Ike was prepared for death, but his love for his family was the only thing that still tethered him to this world. For me, I felt confirmed that my being at his side, saying prayers helped him make a peaceful transition from this life to the next. As Ike went on, I could see him releasing the soul with the same spirit of courage and sacrifice as the early martyrs of Sheikh Tabarsi. I could never have hoped for a better ending to the days of Ike's funeral. Excuse me. The socialization followed. His child friend, Brian Hawksworth, who happens to be sitting here, who I hadn't seen in over 50 years, was with us at the funeral, and he brought with him a video of my father flying from Victoria to Salisbury Island in 1966. We never had any video of that. It was the most significant event of that day for me. As we all saw it, it brought back the beautiful memories that we'd had in the period of our youth. It brought closure to the life of service of the early years of our parents. As my son drove our car to the ferry at the end of the day, I drifted off asleep. Suddenly, I found myself startled, startled and awake. I had been dreaming, and I felt my older brother holding my hand. Kathleen felt that it was Ike expressing his thanks to me. As I live my remaining life these days, I think more often of Ike and Gail and their courageous service to the cause. Excuse me. Their courage to the cause, their family and others, and hope that I can emulate their examples and, free and content, leave this world to join Ike, Gail, and my parents in the Apa kingdom. Thank you, friends.
La sunshine on a cloud. the month of May. I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, my girl, talking about my girl, my girl. I've got so much honey, the bees envy me. I've got a sweeter song than the birds in the trees. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, my girl, talking about my girl, my girl. Baby, one man can pray. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, talking about my girl, my girl. I've got sunshine on a cloudy day with my girl. I've even got the month of May with my girl. Talking about my girl. Ooh, my girl. That's all I can talk about is my girl. For me, there is no one but you. Please love me true. This is my prayer. Answer my prayer now, baby. This is my prayer. Answer it right now, baby. Say you love me too. Answer my prayer. This is my prayer, baby.
Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happy.
Video again.
Important and wonderful event. Before we sign off, I want to leave you all with a small but important ask from the family. It's like your homework. For those of you who are in the post-secondary, you know the student at this point is going to ask, is this for marks? And the answer is yes, this is for marks. Just to preface this homework, Baha'is believe that the highest act of the spiritual life is the act of service to our fellow human beings. Abdul Baha writes, this is worship, to serve mankind and to minister to the needs of the people. So here's the homework. Between today and the very last day of August, that each and every one of us, that includes me, I'm in Mrs. will offer an act of kindness or an act of service to somebody who we know, to one of our fellow human beings, in the name of and in honor of Ike. And in doing this, we'll achieve two things. Those are the marks. First, we'll lift Ike's spirit in the spiritual world and perpetuate its advancement. Service in the name of others contributes to their spiritual advancement. And second, it will bind us further, as we will do our service knowing that each of us is accompanied by all. And in some small measure, we will contribute to the happiness of our fellow human beings. So this will be our task. If you feel inspired, I'm sure the family would really appreciate it if you could post to their social media site, maybe their Facebook site, and a picture or a story of what you did. So with that, I want to thank you all on behalf of the Bennett family in particular for being here today, for all of your beautiful words and thoughts. And if okay, we can now